Okay, so you want to own a medieval watermill. You picture a timber building beside a fast river. Its wheel turning while villagers arrive with sacks of grain. Every sack goes in heavy with wheat, barley, rye, or oats. Every sack comes out as flour or meal, minus one measured share that stays with you. The water keeps moving. The village keeps eating. And your toll keeps falling into the grain chest. That is the dream. And it is not entirely wrong. By the time of Doomsday Book in 1086, England already had more than 6,000 recorded mills. A mill was not a curiosity. It was one of the most important machines in the rural economy. But the wheel is the part everyone notices. The wheel is not the part that decides whether you become rich. A common milling toll in southern England could be around 1/16 of the grain brought through the door. That sounds extraordinary. You collect roughly 6% of a staple food without planting, harvesting, or owning the crop. But 1/16 of small harvest is still small. 1/16 of grain you cannot grind is nothing. And 1/16 of a village that finds another mill is someone else's income. The real business was not simply turning grain into flour. It was controlling a dependable stream of customers, a dependable stream of water, and a contract that did not place every repair on your side of the ledger. So let us build a medieval watermill in southern England around the year 1330. By the end, we will have a reconstructed annual account. We will see what the mill earns in an ordinary year. We will break the water supply. We will crack a millstone. And we will discover why the most valuable part of the mill may not be inside the building at all. First, you need to understand what owning means. Most medieval millers did not buy a freehold building beside a river and operate independently. The land, water rights, and often the mill itself belonged to a lord, monastery, college, town, or other estate owner. The operator usually leased the mill for an annual rent. Sometimes the landlord replaced major millstones. Sometimes the tenant did. Sometimes the landlord maintained the weir and watercourse. Sometimes the lease quietly handed those obligations to the miller. Two mills with identical wheels could therefore be completely different investments. One could be a manageable service business. The other could be a repair liability with a rent attached. The landlord also might possess a legal or customary advantage called suit of mill. Tenants on the manor could be required to bring their grain to the lord's mill and pay the established toll. In some places, hand milling was restricted. In others, compulsory use was weak, disputed, or impossible to enforce. This matters because the strongest medieval mill did not wait for customers to choose it. It sat inside a local system that directed customers toward it. But that monopoly was never as simple as a locked village. Court disputes show arguments over excessive tolls, waiting times, water rights, flooding, and whether the obligation applied at all. A legal right could support the business. It could also generate years of conflict with the people who supplied its revenue. Now choose the site. You do not begin with the building. You begin with water. The river must carry enough flow to work through dry periods, but not destroy the site every winter. You need a weir or dam to raise and redirect part of the water. You need a leat, an artificial channel carrying that water toward the wheel. You need sluices to control the flow. You need a tail race to return the used water downstream. If the natural flow is unreliable, you may need a millpond to store water until enough power is available. Only after all of that do you have a place for a wheel. The building is therefore only the visible center of a much larger hydraulic asset. A broken roof is a building problem. A breached weir is a revenue shutdown. A blocked leat is an idle wheel. A flooded tail race can push water backward and stop the machine when the river is at its strongest. The location also needs road access. Grain arrives by cart, pack animal, or human backs. Flour must leave the same way. A beautiful site far from the village adds time, mud, damaged sacks, and angry customers. A competing mill 2 miles closer can take the business even if your machinery is better. Inside the mill, the water wheel turns a wooden axle. Gearing transfers that motion toward a vertical spindle. The upper millstone rotates while the lower stone remains fixed. Grain drops from a hopper into the space between them. The stones crush and shear the kernels before the meal falls into a surrounding wooden casing. The system looks automatic. It is not. The miller controls the grain flow, stone spacing, water supply, and speed. Set the stones too far apart, and customers receive coarse, uneven meal. Set them too close, and they may overheat, damage the flour, or strike one another. Run empty stones together, and sparks can become a fire risk inside a building filled with flour dust and dry timber. The miller is not just collecting toll. He is operating one of the most technically demanding machines in the district. Now pay for the machinery. The wheel needs heavy timber, iron fittings, an axle, paddles or buckets, gears, shafts, and bearings. The millstones are a separate capital problem. Good stones could be moved long distances from English, Welsh, French, or German sources. A single imported stone could cost more than a mill produced in an ordinary year. And stones do not last forever. They were smooth. Their grooves must be redressed. Eventually one has to be replaced and matched carefully with its partner. At some medieval manors, millstone replacement alone absorbed a meaningful share of mill income. The waterworks demand another reserve. Timber rots. Iron straps loosen. Sluice gates leak. Banks collapse. Silt fills the pond and leak. Floodwater moves stones, trees, and entire sections of earth toward the machinery. The mill uses free energy. It does not use free infrastructure. Then there is labor. A small mill may be operated by one experienced miller, but one person still has limits. Sacks must be lifted. Grain must be measured. The wheel and sluices must be watched. Stones must be dressed. The leat must be cleared. Accounts must be kept. Customers must be served while the machine is running. A wife, child, servant, or hired helper may perform part of that work. If the household provides the labor without a cash wage, the ledger can make the business look more profitable than the family actually feels. So where does the money come from? The first and largest stream is multure, the toll taken from grain brought for grinding. The customer does not always hand you coins. You measure out a fraction of the grain and keep it. That toll can be stored, consumed by the household, used to pay workers, or sold when a buyer is available. This means the mill is partly a service business and partly a grain trading business. The amount earned depends on two variables at once. How much grain passes through the stones? And what is the retained grain worth when you use or sell it? A strong harvest increases the volume available for grinding, but abundant grain can lower the market price. A bad harvest reduces throughput, yet the smaller toll you collect may be worth more per quarter. Revenue can move in opposite directions depending on weather and price. The second stream is grain from customers outside the compulsory manor network. Travelers, nearby free tenants, brewers, bakers, or residents from another settlement may use the mill if the service is fast and the meal is good. These customers are valuable because they're choosing you. They're also easy to lose. A long queue, a dishonest measure, or damaged flour can send them to another wheel. The third stream is specialized grinding. Wheat for fine bread may require better stones and closer attention. Barley and malt for brewing may be ground differently. Oats, peas, beans, and mixed grains produce different meal and wear the stones in different ways. A mill that can handle several products keeps working across more of the agricultural calendar. But specialization only helps if the equipment and skill justify the extra expense. The fourth stream may sit outside the grinding room. A mill lease sometimes includes a pond, fishery, meadow, small field, house, or other attached rights. The pond can provide eels or fish. The land can support animals or produce hay. These additions are not the core business, but they can pay part of the rent during a weak milling year. The fifth stream belongs mainly to the landlord. Instead of operating the mill, the estate can lease it for fixed annual rent. The landlord receives predictable cash and transfers much of the daily operating work to the tenant. The tenant keeps whatever remains after rent, repairs, labor, and losses. This arrangement explains why the owner and the operator can experience the same mill very differently. The landlord may see a stable rent-producing asset. The miller may see a river-powered machine that can demand money faster than it produces grain. Now, let us build a reconstructed annual account. This is not a surviving medieval profit statement. It is a demonstration assembled from documented toll rates, output ranges, grain prices, rents, and repair patterns. Assume our mill has one working pair of stones. In an ordinary year, it grinds 360 quarters of mixed grain. One quarter contains 8 bushels. That volume sits inside the broad output range historians have reconstructed for working medieval mills. At a toll of 1/16, the mill retains 22.5 quarters. Use a blended value of 5 shillings per quarter for the retained mix. The main toll is worth 112 shillings and 6 pence. That equals 5 pounds, 12 shillings and 6 pence. Add 15 shillings from optional customers, malt batches, and occasional cash grinding. Add another 10 shillings from the pond, attached land, or other small lease rights. Total reconstructed revenue reaches 137 shillings and 6 pence. That is 6 pounds, 17 shillings and 6 pence. Now open the cost side. Annual rent to the estate is 30 shillings in this model. A helper, seasonal lifting labor, and occasional cartage consume 12 shillings. Timber, iron pieces, grease, rope, and routine mechanical work take 10 shillings. The mill sets aside 14 shillings toward dressing and replacing stones. Another 10 shillings goes into a reserve for the weir, sluices, leat, pond bank, and flood damage. Losses, spoiled grain, measurement disputes, and small unpaid obligations take 6 shillings. Total operating costs reach 82 shillings. That leaves 55 shillings and 6 pence. In pounds, the apparent operating surplus is 2 pounds, 15 shillings and 6 pence. And that is before assigning a full wage to the miller's own labor. It is also before feeding and housing any family members who help operate the site. The wheel turned all year. Hundreds of quarters passed through the stones. The business retained part of nearly every load, and the remaining surplus is still not a fortune. This is the first financial trap. A percentage of every customer's grain feels like a royalty. In reality, it is a low-volume toll attached to an expensive mechanical system. The second trap is that the toll is revenue in kind. A chest full of grain is valuable. It is not automatically cash. Rent may be due on a fixed date. A millwright may demand coin. A new iron fitting may need to be purchased immediately. If grain prices are weak or the nearest market is distant, the mill can be profitable on paper and short of money at the same time. The third trap is capacity. The mill earns when grain passes through the stones. But harvests are seasonal. Customers arrive in clusters. A strong water flow at midnight has little value if no grain is waiting. A full queue is also dangerous because customers do not enjoy watching their food sit beside a motionless wheel. The fourth trap is maintenance responsibility. A lease offering low rent may be expensive if the tenant must replace stones and rebuild waterworks. A higher rent can be safer if the landlord carries the largest capital repairs. The number written beside rent does not tell you the true cost of the contract. The repair clauses do. Now change one variable. A dry season reduces usable water and lowers annual throughput from 360 quarters to 240. At the same toll, you now retain only 15 quarters of grain. At 5 shillings per quarter, main toll income falls to 75 shillings. Some secondary income remains, but most operating obligations do not fall by 1/3. The rent is still due. The wheel still needs repairs. The stones still need dressing. The household still needs food. The mill does less work, but the asset does not become 1/3 cheaper to exist. Now change a different variable. The harvest is good, customers arrive, and the wheel is busy. Then the weir breaks after heavy rain. Repair costs 40 shillings. The mill closes while carpenters, laborers, and carts move timber and earth into place. Customers carry their grain to another mill because bread cannot wait. You pay for the repair. You lose the toll during the shutdown. And when the wheel turns again, some customers may not return. The physical damage is only the first loss. The second loss is the habit of using your competitor. This is why the water right and waterworks matter more than the attractive wheel. Without controlled water, every other asset inside the building becomes stranded machinery. A real late medieval example shows how brutal that mistake could be. At Ivanhoe, the Bishop of Winchester replaced an often damaged windmill with a new watermill and watercourses in the 1390s. The project reportedly cost around £130. Afterward, the estate could obtain only 53 shillings and 4 pence in annual rent. That is £2, 13 shillings and 4 pence per year. Ignoring every repair, every vacancy, and every collection problem, simple payback would take almost 49 years. The structure may have been technically impressive. The revenue base was not. By 1408 to 1409, the estate built a horse mill there instead. The expensive water-powered solution had not created enough profitable demand to justify its cost. Failure did not look like an empty ruin on the first day. It looked like a new machine beside a carefully built watercourse. It looked like rent arriving every year. It looked functional, but the return was too small for the capital trapped in the site. That is the dangerous version of a medieval infrastructure failure. The asset works. The investment does not. Now compare that with a stronger model. A strong mill begins with an established customer base, not an empty stretch of river. The local manor contains enough grain-producing households within practical hauling distance. The right to receive their business is clear enough to reduce uncertainty, but not enforced so badly that every customer becomes an enemy. The water supply is controllable across ordinary seasons. Road access is good. The lease is long enough to justify improvements. Major repairs are divided clearly between landlord and miller. The mill has enough throughput to reserve money for stones and waterworks before distributing profit. It also has a small second income from land, a pond, malt grinding, or outside customers. Most importantly, the operator protects trust. The toll measure is visible and accepted. The stones are properly set. Grain is returned cleanly. Queues move. Customers do not find unexplained losses inside the mill. The medieval miller had a terrible reputation in stories for a reason. The operator stood between the customer and the household's food. He controlled the measuring dish. He controlled the machine. He could hide theft inside dust, spillage, or an inaccurate toll. That created opportunity. It also created a fragile business. A mill suspected of cheating may keep compulsory tenants for a time. It will lose every customer who has a choice. The weak operator sees a captive village and extracts as much grain as possible. The strong operator sees a recurring service relationship that must survive every harvest. The weak operator postpones work on the lead until the wheel stops. The strong operator clears silt and repairs banks before the weather makes the decision. The weak operator treats family labor as free profit. The strong operator understands that a household can be exhausted even when the account shows a surplus. The weak landlord builds a mill because water is available. The strong landlord builds only when customers, rights, transport, and repair responsibilities make the water valuable. A mature buyer would therefore inspect more than the building. How many households actually owe or choose suit a mill? How many quarters passed through the stones in recent years? What share was wheat, malt, oats, or mixed grain? Who owns the weir and the banks upstream? Who pays after a flood? When were the stones last replaced? Is there another mill within practical carting distance? Does the lease include a pond, fishery, meadow, or house? Is the toll customary, disputed, or regularly challenged? Those questions reveal the real asset. Future change can strengthen or destroy it. A growing market town can add bakers, brewers, and outside customers. A new road can move traffic toward the mill. A rival windmill can remove dependence on the river. Population loss after plague can reduce grain volume and weaken compulsory obligations. Higher labor and stone costs can make an old toll rate insufficient. A mill that once controlled a village can become excess capacity within a generation. So can owning a medieval watermill make you wealthy? Yes, under the right structure. The mill sells an essential service. Its energy arrives without buying fuel. Customers return after every harvest. A strong legal position can protect demand. And one machine can process more grain than households could conveniently grind by hand. But the romantic version leaves out the main condition. You do not become rich because water turns a wheel. You become rich only if enough grain reaches that wheel. The water remains under control, and someone else does not own the most dangerous repair clause. The wheel is not the business. The protected flow of grain, water, and obligation through the wheel is.